am Candace Dickens, dope Black therapist, and I am here with an extraordinary dope clinician who is a master in the field of behavioral health. I am here with no other but Mr. Devin Blackwood, licensed clinical alcohol and drug counselor. How are you, sir?
I'm doing very well. I just got back from South America. I was there for 10 days on a missions trip. So I just landed back on US soil on Monday. So it's
Oh,
been off
wow.
to the races. I'm settling back in on American soil. It was an awesome trip. I saw quite a lot of things, but not the most pleasant. But that's what I do. I'm just trying to make a
Mm.
difference in the world.
Wow. So I am so grateful that you're making a difference internationally in the world as a human and as a clinician, but I'm so grateful that you took time to spend time with us to talk about this topic tonight. So thank you so much. I know you have to be tired.
Yes, the first couple of days, I was so sleepy because it was five of us who went, and it's every year. I grew up doing missions trip, and hence my love, for the profession of counseling because I grew up in a very nurturing environment, especially with my mother. And in fact, most of my siblings were actually doing something where we're enhancing people's lives.
Yeah,
We're just trying to make a difference. Such as
absolutely.
yourself too. Like such as
Absolutely.
yourself. Yeah, yeah, with what
Yeah.
you do.
That's why you're amazing. You're a dope clinician because you try to make a difference. And I so appreciate that because we don't people don't realize that we just don't do counseling, we do advocacy, we do missions, we give back, right? We just give unselfishly of ourselves. So I am appreciative of you being here and I want us to jump into the discussion. Because it's a timely discussion because there are so many people who are grappling with being connected to someone who lives addicted, a person who's struggling with whether it's gambling, alcohol and drug counseling, exercise addiction, love addiction. There are so many people who are struggling with it, and the addiction gets the issue. But the people who are living with the addicts or are loving the addicts or working with the addicts, they don't always get acknowledged about what that trauma is like for them as well. And I wanted to bring light to that, and I made a little list. Can you hear me clearly?
And no, could you turn up your volume just a little more for me?
Okay. Okay. Is that better?
Yes, better.
Okay,
Yes.
perfect, perfect. So I want to begin by reading off some people who come to mind when I think about addiction. Um, drug and alcohol addiction, DMX. Um, I think about Morton Downey Jr., Iron Man.
Oh,
I
you're a
think
little
about
low again. Candice, you're a little low again. You were louder just now.
oh, okay,
Okay, yes, you're louder now, like right
okay,
here.
okay. So when I think about, and you may have to turn your music down a little bit because I can't hear you that well. Is it
And
possible?
yeah, who have the music on?
I think you have music on.
It's me who have the music on?
Yes,
How did I put the music on?
it's okay.
Okay, one second. I thought it was you.
No,
Oh, sorry.
it's okay. It's okay.
Yeah.
It was good music. Let me tell you something.
I
It was
thought,
good
you
music.
know, I thought it was you. I thought it was you.
No,
I thought it was
it's
you.
good
I
music.
was all I said, what a lovely music.
It's
I didn't
good
know
music.
it was
Very
me.
timely. Because here's the thing we know about this thing we know about recovery. Recovery is a spiritual experience. And what I love is that without us being aware that that music was on unintentionally, but it ties
Yeah,
into
it was.
addiction, recovery, spirituality, all of that. So it is perfect timing. So I'm going to read some people because I want people to not just think about addiction as oh it's the person who's just using drugs and alcohol. Addiction is a broad field. Like when I think about gambling addiction, I think about Gladys Knight, who wrote a book about how it almost ruined her life. When I think about love and sex addiction, I think about Jada Pinkett Smith. I think about Eric Benet, Lindsay Lohan. When I think about work addiction, I think about Joe Bangle, Joe, no, it's a Bojangle, who only had 1 day off a year. When I think about work addiction, I think about Sammy Davis Jr., who took only 2 weeks off a year, right? It's that compulsion. And people don't realize that being with an addict can be traumatic because it's that up and down, it's that roller coaster, it's that disconnection that happens.
And the
And
uncertainty. Yeah, the unpredictability.
yes, so brother, talk about that.
Yeah, well, Candice, that's really why. And thank you so much again for having me. And good evening to everyone who's joining us. Yeah, but that's really why 20 years at Johns Hopkins Hospital. Um, that was really why I wrote my first book,
Mm,
Beyond the Lingo, Working Through Recovery Concepts, a guide for um, addicted persons and their families, because a couple who was in their 70s came into the office one day and they were so helpless and hopeless in
mm,
regards to the multiple children who were addicted. And they had a 42-year-old daughter who had just bled their bank accounts, and they were just at a wit's end, really, at what to do. And that was really at that moment, which was a defining moment, where I felt helpless too as a therapist. Like, oh my God, how can
yeah,
I help this couple? What can I say? How can I really help them to really intervene and end the cycle of a 42-year-old daughter? They should be traveling the seas and on ships and
mm,
oceans to enjoy their retirement, yet they're raising multiple grandchildren and really not enjoying their life. So when we talk about addiction, just like what you said, we're really talking about psychopathology, right? Psychopathology are the factors that really drives a certain kind of behavior. And as we know, traumatic episodes, environmental issues, social, cognitive, intellectual development, as well as real just emotions, unsteady emotions that creates this kind of drive
yeah,
to be self-soothing, to find some self-soothing behavior and maladaptive coping. For those who's really addicted, like they struggle, all it's just a beast, like what they
absolutely,
say in the 12-step programs all by itself. Because when you think that you have it under control, you really don't have it under control.
absolutely,
Because
absolutely.
once it takes off, it's like a forest fire. You just don't
Mhm.
know what will be the injury in between, what will be the end result, and the damage along the way. For
Yeah.
those who's looking on, they sort of kind of like want to help, but sometimes they just don't know what to help, how to intervene, what to say, you
Mhm.
know, um, and how to help.
Absolutely.
And yet it leaves a whole lot of, like sometimes just the sense of helplessness within a family system, especially for children, especially. How
Mm,
do I talk to mom and dad? See, it's always the fact that parents are always lecturing their children, isn't it?
mhm,
But what about when mom and dad in the COVID pandemic, Candice, they said that a whole lot more of our nation's children were eyewitnesses to moms and dad, you know, um, drinking and substance
absolutely.
addicted behavior. Everybody's in a very close knitted environment, domestic abuse,
Mhm.
gambling, fighting, violence,
Yeah.
mental health issues, as well as active addiction, because children are in the home and families are there. There's no room to escape when mom can hide
Yeah.
or dad can sneak off in the closet. So the children were first had a first, like a first hand account of really
Absolutely.
what addiction feel like. But the challenge is what do I say to mom and dad? What do I say to grandma when I see her fall down the stairs? Or dad
Mhm.
when he's, popping pills? Or mom when she's using cocaine at the table? How does the argument go? What does the first line um, of conversation sound like? Should I intervene? What should I say? It's very scary. It's very
Oh,
frightening.
it's very frightening. And if I want to add to that, because sometimes we think about, just not that the children, but you also have the other relatives, the grandparents, you have the spouses, who'll say, "Wow, during COVID, I'm with this person who's a sex addict." And it's the first time where they get exposed to like, wow, I'm finding all this pornography and I'm watching what's on their computers, so they're sharing their computers and things are popping up and they've got this whole other life, right? Or they're a gambler, and every time I turn around, they're trying to go to Casino Live because they were open for a period of time, the gambling places, or they're online gambling, and it really allowed a lot of people to live their addiction behind closed doors, but within the front of their family where it impacts them. Or I've had clients who say, I felt so powerless, I relapsed, and I didn't have the heart to tell my partner that I gambled away the rent or the mortgage because I felt like I just had to do something to bring me up. And that something was maybe a scratch off. And the next thing you know, that they're spending so much money on the scratch offs that they can't pay the rent, they can't pay their kids' school. And we know that gambling addictions has the highest suicide rate of all the addictions because there's that shame. Because unlike other addictions, you can't smell it and you don't know when they've relapsed. But there are a lot of addictions that come with shame, right? There's a lot of addictions. Most addictions come with shame because you feel like you've harmed someone. But you talked about a fire. When you're living with an addict or connected, they set you on fire as well. There's that feeling of being powerless. And you know that for a lot of them, the way they deal with their powerlessness is by become overactive. They fix things. They're the codependents. They take over. And I'm wondering, do you see that a lot in your clients, that the way they deal with their trauma of living with the addict is that they double up? They try to
Of
fix.
course. Oh yeah, definitely. I mean, if we're really thinking really about, like social, emotional, mental health, I mean, we're really talking about multi-dimensional illnesses, right? We're talking really about a faucet of various disorders, from
Mhm.
anxiety. They said that something that we found very interesting in the COVID, because like I've addressed it and you have too, on the forum and so
Yeah.
forth. One, for those who are already were already diagnosed, right, prior to COVID. For those who had additional diagnosis, because of what was going on. For those who are very first time diagnosis because of the anxiety, children who are projecting and reflecting parental behaviors and parental disorders, like and the like. So all of that stuff. So there are various dimensions and various contributory factors that play a huge role in that. Secondly, it really tells us really about the mental health of America. If I
Mhm.
was to give a grade really with our mental health in regards to the pathological gambling, when we have gambled it off, that's really why I'm so against casinos. And the thing about it is that when they always bring casinos, they do this insidious act. Oh, we're gonna do it for the children's
For the school.
education.
Right.
Yeah, but we're gonna get more school books for the
Yeah.
children. I want to get hospital beds and build recreational centers for children. And it becomes a justification, because when we hear that there is good things that will be happening with the money, it's like, oh, okay, well, yeah, let's do it,
Yeah.
but it's unhealthy.
Yeah.
Like gambling is a very unhealthy behavior,
Yeah.
because there are some addictions in where one is self-injurious addictions is just to me, right?
Yeah.
Someone who might do something that is just really harmful. Of course, it affects society,
Yeah.
it affects the family and so. But gambling has an adverse effect on people's life. You're talking about people's money. You're talking about when the home is now
Yeah.
in foreclosure.
Yeah.
Where do the children go? You know,
Absolutely.
what
Or
happened?
or the
Yeah,
and the other victims is that sometimes gamblers will steal from their employers. So you find a lot of gamblers who are the payroll people. Or I think there was a huge case, I think it was maybe 5 years ago, where there was a nun who was at a Catholic school, and she had stolen the money from the school, so the school had to close. Because you can't tell, because we trust them. And that's the part that's really difficult, because once you've been victimized that way, it takes away your ability to trust. Like, one of the things I know that in a lot of states that they've legalized marijuana. And one of the things that often hear a common complaint is from the people who live with the person who's addicted to marijuana, which is why it's a different marijuana. It's that heavy oil to it. Um, and it creates such dissension in the home for the people who don't smoke, who say, hey, I go outside and I don't want to smell like that. And there's that feeling of being out of control because they can't control when the addict uses and when the addict doesn't use, whether or not it's marijuana or cocaine, or you're doing mollies or it's anything that they're using in excess. Yeah.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. But also the system of denial, which is so
Mhm.
strong. Like the system of denial and defense mechanism, Candice, is so strong
Yeah.
because everybody else is seeing the behavior. And
Mm.
we're seeing the whirlwind, the domino effect of what's going on, both with, problems with occupational health,
Yeah.
psychological health, atypical motivation, especially in teenagers who just too lazy to get up to go to school. They have mood swings, they have irritation, they're, like dysregulated in regards to,
Mm.
how they, monitor um, their mood and the
Yeah.
like, and it's all these kinds of stuff. It's just all of these, patterns of dysregulation, maladaptive behavior, pathogenic,
Mhm.
societal influences, conduct disorders, all of these kind of stuff. And so everybody else is sort of kind of like seeing it, but the addicted persons have a hard time. They say nothing's wrong with me,
Mhm.
like, but denial is
Yes.
so strong. And I remember when I did my internship, when I first
Yeah.
started out in the field, right?
Mhm.
Johns Hopkins Bayview. Poor me, I would just be student, just be
Innocent.
fresh coming out of college, so fighting with the man. Yes, you do have a problem. No,
Yeah.
I don't. Yes, you do have a problem. No, I don't.
Yeah.
Yes, you do have a problem. No, I don't. And after about one of the clinicians who were more seasoned and so called me aside and said, Devin, you cannot fight with denial. You're
No.
going to lose all the time
Yeah.
until the person come to their senses
Yeah.
and come to their own self-acceptance, their own
Mm.
self-awareness,
Yeah.
and their own motivational, like uh, self-motivators with really why they have internalized a
Yeah.
need to change. And so you're not gonna win.
No.
You're gonna lose all the time.
So can imagine if you're living with that person and you can smell it, you can see them nodding off, and you can see the behavior changes, talking fast, they're not sitting still, and then they deny it, and you feel like, wait a minute, maybe I'm crazy. It creates that rift because you're looking at someone, and the frustration is that they won't acknowledge it, and not only will they not acknowledge it, they won't get help. And for many people, it's traumatic because I'm living in a situation where I know that I know what I know, and I'm powerless to stop it. And I can't get the other person to see it. But then the worry comes with that. And I want to talk a little bit about that because part of being someone who cares for an addict is that constant worrying about what's going to happen next. Are they going to die? Are they going to overdose? Who's around them? Is anything being stolen from my house? Do I get that call at 3 o'clock in the morning that they've been locked up because they've done something? Can you talk a little bit about that worry, that traumatic experience of, you know, not knowing if it's safe for the person?
Yeah, well, the thing about it is that, in the conversation pieces with really, like, first of all, really trying to help, but feeling totally helpless. There's a whole lot of stuff that can come from that because the helper or the person who's really looking on, who feels helpless, they really want to point out their eyewitnesses to what's going on,
Yeah,
the illness,
yeah,
the infliction, the ailments with what they're seeing within the home environment, grandmothers who become enablers, those
mm,
who become codependent,
yeah,
those who, like, develop, illnesses too. Like, people take on other people's,
yeah,
like, illnesses. They can be socially withdrawn, like they might get depressed, they might develop mood swings and aggravation and other kinds of stuff too, so um like, it's a tough fight, right? It really is like pulling teeth, to be honest with you. It really, really, really is, because over the years I see this all constantly, all the time. And
yeah.
what families really have to do is, like, we've got to set our own boundaries, right? So it's all about really setting boundaries. And what we
Mhm.
mean by that is that, one, we've got to first recognize that adults are adults and that they're responsible for how they live their lives. And I know that sounds like callous and it sounds like insensitive, but that's really how we maintain our own sense of sanity.
Yeah.
Because if not, we're going to go off the deep end, including therapists. Practitioners, like we want to save the world,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Yeah, because we're taught by, go save the world, I'm going to make a difference, and we're out there all ready to go before college degree. I'm going to save the world and make a great impact on society, and everything's going to change, and we're going to make families get along together. No one's going to be suicidal. You just watch when I sit in the chair. But we are hit really quick with reality, aren't we?
Yeah.
Yeah, because we're helpers, but we're not savers.
That's huge.
Right. We're helpers,
Let's say that
but we're
again.
not
That's
savers.
Right. Because you do know, because you're speaking about the adults, but there are parents and guardians and community members who try to save not just adults, but adolescents and children who've been in numerous, and as a clinician, we've seen it, where they go from this facility to this facility, and the parents spend all their money getting double jobs. The child's robbed them, been in and out of relapse, been in some criminal issues, and their parents will say, maybe this time. And they get so devastated, right? And this is why it's traumatic, because they get so devastated that once again, things are happening to them, that they're losing control with this child. This child's not being able to tell them the truth, that they're maybe even lost a job because of the fact they've not been able to be there consistently because this child is really struggling. He's been put out of school, or it's in fights or something. And they really try to save them. And then that savior complex drains them because they're putting all their energy. Yeah.
And yes, yeah, definitely. But here's the thing, Bo. The way to really fully understand addictions or mental illness or psychopathology, one of our favorite terminology, or emotional conditions or emotional disorders, it's a sort of like work from the bottom up. And so I always use the unpeeling of the onion in therapy, especially as it relates to adolescents, because they understand it better. So I sort of like get an onion, or I just at least describe an onion. So like, let's look at the onion, because what we see when folks come into treatment, practitioners, what moms and dads are seeing in children, what children and adolescents are seeing in moms and dads, we're seeing the top behavior, right? So we see the surface behavior. But what we say to them, let's start to unpeel the onion. Unpeel the onion. There's a middle section there, right? The middle section of things that can either, like stimulate or fuel what's going on underneath, or suppress, what's down here. The root behavior is always at the bottom, which pushes up, it pushes up everything from the root. We must first understand what's going on with the, ideology, contributory factors, protective factors, and factors that are driving the behavior. And that's really why we ask the tough questions. That's really why parents really themselves really have to take a honest look, or when they bring their adolescents in, but they're very honest with the history. Because parents aren't very honest with the history. They acts up in school, he's not listening, and this one, he wants to act up, and so, and I'm trying to go, okay, let's relax a little bit, mom. Yeah, just breathe 10 times. Dad, sit down a little bit. It's going to be okay. We're going to get to this, and so on. This 12-year-old kid who all of a sudden overnight decides that we're going to go to school.
Yeah.
We're going to start to smoke. We're going to start to drink. We're going to start to fight, pick, punch, and bully. No, it just doesn't happen like that. In the same way that no one says, you know what? I just think I just want to just make my career out of just being a cocaine addict. I just don't want to work. I want to be lazy. Like, I want to spend all my money and just, it doesn't happen like that. But when we explain it to people, like, of course they are. They choose to be addicts. Of course they are. They just don't want to do anything with their life. Whereas with me, I'm trying to understand in my brain what went wrong.
What happened?
Because something went terribly wrong.
Yeah.
There is something that went wrong somewhere, because I refuse to believe or to assume or to hold the worldview, Candice, but folks just want to just gamble off their money. But folks want to be homeless, but they want to have fuss and fights with their spouse. They want to come in reeking of heroin. They want to be nodding at the table.
Yeah.
Kids want to be fighting at school and breaking the law. I don't really think a sensible, normal, the average person is thinking like, I want to be a destroyer of
Yeah.
society.
Yeah.
Unless they have sociopathy, then that's a whole different argument.
Right.
But the average person who suffers from some kind of addiction, they themselves is battling inside. They have this, this, you know, this, shame, guilt, insecurity, inadequacy.
Yeah.
They have all of this. It is a fight and a struggle inside.
Yeah.
And that's the first thing we've got to understand. What drives the behavior? What are the contributory factors? When we can begin to really understand why Day, Jeremy, and Suana do
Mm.
the things they do, we can start to get a grip of it. And that's really the stance with what we take with intervention. We say, moms and dad, let's sit down with an open mind. Let's try just to look, because a lot of times you'll be surprised. A lot of things, the children's behavior is being mimicked by the parents. But do you know what is most striking? With this marijuana, this legalization of marijuana, so that we can get money in America's coffers, because someone of us who's totally, completely against marijuana, I do support medicalized marijuana prescribed by a physician with a full comprehensive assessment,
Mm.
as and it makes sense in regards to mental health,
Yeah.
emotional health,
Yeah.
a diagnosis in regards to certain kind of illness. But I don't believe in this rampant society just running wild. Just give everybody weed. Let's just get high and stink
Yeah.
of pot all day long and so forth. It's terrible. It's messing up our society. We've got to
Absolutely.
get a better grip on that.
Yeah. So there's the assumption that people are going to be responsible. And what I love is that we know how that is, which is why we have a legal age for alcohol, because there was a period where there was no legal age. And then we're realizing people started abusing it and they're not mature enough to know how this impacts them, how it impacts the memory, all of that stuff. But I love the something you said is that um, parents get angry with the children or the other loved ones in their life, whether it's a spouse or a grandparent, because they don't realize this is a family issue, a systemic issue, right? And they don't have the understanding that the person's not doing this to them on purpose. That's where the anger comes from, because the feeling is you're doing this, but you just stop, and not realizing something happened to them. And this is how they're dealing with it and coping with it, right? It's what happened to you that's eating you up. So when you've got someone who's on cocaine, or someone who's 600 pounds, or someone who's 57 pounds and 6 foot tall. Something happened to them. But the trauma comes from it's a long, insidious process. And it fills the person with frustration because it feels like it's their Katrina. Like, I'm powerless. I can't get in the boat and swim away because this person is connected with me, either through family bonds or through a marital agreement or through friendship. That there's always that feeling of not knowing what's going to happen next with them. And the resentment is they can choose not to do that. And it's not so easy to just stop. It's not so easy, right?
Yeah,
Yeah.
right. But exactly, absolutely correct, absolutely correct. Or, oh boy, shucks, what was I gonna say now? Yeah, or sometimes avoidance. Right, exactly, right. So it's not easy at all. It really, really isn't. Right, because
Yeah.
we're talking about ingrained behaviors, we're talking about coping behaviors,
Yeah.
self-soothing behaviors,
Yeah.
we're talking about operant conditioning,
Yeah.
classical conditioning. We're talking about behavioral rehearsal, things that people have done
Yeah.
over a period of time, but becomes, where there's dependency, psychological,
Hmm.
physiological dependency, social issues, and so forth. But here are some things. There's two ways with how folks can either deal with this, right? One, avoidance, right? There's a whole lot of avoidance within family systems. I'm going to pretend like this really don't exist, because
Disconnection.
the
Right.
instant, right, exactly, because the instant that I have to face it head on, it means I've got to look at my own behaviors. And
Mm.
a lot of times family system are pretty much the cause sometimes of real, like, why we
Mhm.
act. It's not a blame,
Yeah.
but sometimes certain things within the family system, disruption, dysfunctionalism,
Mhm.
codependency, enabling behaviors, addictions, diseases, but is rampant in family, very poor values, abandonment issues,
Yeah.
attachment disorders, trauma. No, it is inflicted into the child, or it is
Yeah.
inflicted onto mom. Mom is acting out exactly what, like what was manifested or reflected within the family system. Um, now I've got to face it. or I'm going to avoid it, because
Yeah.
now I've got to look at my own self.
You can be
Secondly,
clear. Yeah.
sometimes we watch the behavior, we do nothing about it. We watch the
Mm.
behavior, we don't say anything, we don't set limits. And this is very common in adolescence, Candice. I know that you've worked with adolescents. Some of our audience might have
Yeah.
worked with, adolescents and so forth. And there's something here that I find very, very striking. So the adolescent comes in, right? The child, the adolescent come in. We have all these ideas in our heads as practitioners with how we can help the family to set limits in regards to the adolescents, right? So they come in and say, you know what, Devin, Day keeps coming home very late. He's smoking weed, he's drinking, he's coming in drunk, he's doing this, that, and the other.
Yeah.
And he comes into the house late and he thinks he can just walk in and walk out. I said, okay, so how does he get in the house? How does he get in the house at quick? He has his own key.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
look.
Yeah.
Look,
Yeah. Absolutely.
I know.
Yeah.
I'm trying to set limit. Don't give him a key.
Yeah. Uh-huh.
Yeah.
But then here's the other part, right? You can be the parent or the grandparent or the guardian who comes in the house late, high, or who comes in the house irritated because they were drawing. And there's that same feeling of being powerless and wanting to please this person. We don't want to upset this person. And I think some parents let that teenager in or that child in, or even their spouse in, because they're afraid of the conflict. Because this is a trauma that keeps going. And it's like they have the argument rehearsed. And like, I don't want to deal with that because it takes too much to argue in a fight, and they start giving in. Or they present, I don't want to see it because I don't want to have that feeling where I'm tense, or I can't go to work, or I'm frustrated. Right. And that's why I say it's such a traumatic experience, because with trauma, we either fight, flight, right, or we freeze, or we shut down. And after a while, you're going to stop fighting and you'll freeze it, or you'll shut down, or there'll be a war, which is why you find a lot of violence happening in relationships with someone who's an addict. Whether it's verbal and physical, from people who are very peaceful people, but who are so angry because they can't stop the addiction.
Absolutely, that is so true. Or sometimes the parent themselves assumes blame. There is always somebody within a family system who assumes blame.
Yeah.
Somebody assumes and take on the blame role, and they tend to be much more empathetic,
Yeah.
much more sympathetic, compassionate, and much more like the enablers who enables the person's behavior.
Good
because
job.
they assume blame, because the addict is placing blame
Yeah.
and projecting blame. It's your fault,
Yeah.
Mom, because you sent me with grandpa. He molested me when I was 10.
Yeah.
It's your fault, Dad, because you were in prison when I was young and I needed you.
Yeah.
So this is what they do. The addicted persons are pretty much blamers of
Absolutely.
I'm not scorning the behavior,
Specializing
but blame, right? Which takes the responsibility off of me, so I can continue my behavior. Don't hold me accountable because it's that person's fault. And now this person is taking on the role. So they start to back off, right? They start to back off. I'm not going to do anything because it's really my fault anyway.
It's the guilt, right? And the guilt and shame sometimes goes with trauma, right? It's that guilt and shame, right? That it's my fault. I must be, and it becomes identity. I'm a bad person, and now I got to fix it, and I got to keep trying to fix it and making it better. And it becomes a compulsive behavior. The addiction's compulsive, right? Which is why I love watching that show Hoarder, because you get to see an addict. Right? Every addict uses over their feelings, and every addict uses over because they feel out of control, and they want to seek pleasure and not deal with the pain that's connected to that situation, whatever that situation is. But the person who's connected with them are afraid of the conflict, or they're afraid of upsetting them, or they're afraid of them dying. Right? So they, using the word you use, they enable them to be disabled. They protect them from the future coming. No, I'll call the boss because I don't want you to get fired. They're so afraid of this person losing things. They're overly invested, but they're underinvested in terms of taking care of themselves, recognizing that they're not sleeping because they're afraid that they may miss the call, or they're not sleeping because they're afraid that the person might come in and steal something. They live in terror. And that's a horrible experience. So what are some things that you could, the next couple minutes, that you could advise people who are living with a person who's addicted, or who are loving someone from afar who's addicted to, they can do self-care and recognize when they're having some of those trauma experience where they're having recurrent thoughts, feeling powerless, helpless, on the edge all the time, where they're having thoughts and memories about this person and flashbacks of negative things, and where they're just not feeling at ease in their own spirit, their own soul, because they're so worried about what's going to happen next, or they're feeling powerless in their own house. They have to stand up. What is some things that they can do?
Yeah. The honest truth, one, they've got to utilize their own self-empowerment.
Mm,
They've got to try to understand boundaries and set their own boundaries. And I know that that's a terminology that can be used very loosely, but you'd be surprised about how much folks really do come in sometimes at intervention and
mhm.
don't really recognize or understand the amount of boundary issues that they themselves have in the process. And
Yeah.
that they themselves are really like, like we can be conduits to change,
Yeah.
we can be the chasm to probably betterment of behavior. But when we start to change, that's how
Mhm.
other people start to change.
Absolutely.
A lot of, yeah, that's right. Yeah, when we start to change and react differently, it evokes and elicits a total different response in the person who's carry on. That means
Absolutely.
money. You will no longer, like, I just can't give you money anymore. And no,
Mm,
I cannot give you the keys to my car anymore. I've really, really got to just take a couple of, and as much as you threaten me, what if I die if you don't give me $40? And like, what if I don't use and I go through withdrawal and I die and I start to shake? It's always this kind of, you got to be willing to say, especially when you're dealing with adults, honestly, I've carried you far enough. You've
yeah.
got to carry yourself.
Yeah.
Mandis, get an interventionist in the house.
Yeah.
Like, talk to a physician, but an interventionist coming into the home
Absolutely.
is a great thing to do.
Oh, absolutely. And I think we've seen some of those shows called intervention. Having someone in, like when I watch those shows, I watch all the shows, but I'm referencing these shows because people have seen them. When you watch something like 600 Pounds Live, when they get anxious, they want to eat. When people who are enablers or people who love people who are addicted get anxious, they want to fix. And we'll say, but part of the treatment, if you have a trauma related to someone who is addicted to substances, um, is to sit with that trauma, acknowledge it, that you're feeling out of control, that something has happened to you, that this person who you care for might be your Katrina. They're taking you all over the place, and you just want to be stable, but because of their disease, they can't give you stability, and you've got to put a life raft around you and figure out how to take you to a healing place with the help of either a counselor, a therapist, a
Yeah.
pastor, an
Or
addictions
12-step
person,
groups.
a
12-step
12-step
group
group.
still
Yes,
works. Yeah. Yeah, 12-step groups are excellent. And more people actually YouTubing. Like they just go on
yes,
YouTube and they
yes,
can sort of like got some self-help books. They can
yes.
join some kind of a group with other people who's going through the
Mhm,
same thing.
mhm.
There's just a whole host of things. They can go in for a family session. There's a lot of things but they really can really begin to set limits. No,
Oh,
we're going to have some
absolutely.
order within our home. I can appreciate the fact that you're addicted, but you're no longer going to steal from us.
Good
You're
job.
no longer going to wreck our cars. You're no
Yeah.
longer going to bring guns and drugs into the home. Like, you're
Mm,
no longer going to be stumbling on the floor and they come to rescue you and pick you up.
mm,
I will no longer be giving you money. If you need a ride to a meeting, I will take you to a meeting. If you need $10 for your nails, I will bring you to the nail shop and pay. But no more of this, that, and the third. We will no longer do that. You've got to
mm.
say it, but when you got to mean it when you say it,
You
because a
got it.
lot of folks, they say it
Yeah.
when their emotions is high,
Yeah.
and in 2 minutes, everything is hanky-dory, and it's back to the same
The
old
trauma
stuff.
comes back and you're reliving
Yep,
it.
it
And you
comes
never
right
get
back.
to go on shore. You're still in Katrina. And one of the things I'm hoping that everyone gets to hear is that you've got to create boundaries and you've got to recognize that something now has happened to you and you're easily triggered. For some people who live with or love someone who's addicted, a trigger could be, wow, I'm hearing the door open. A trigger could be it's 3 o'clock. And normally this is when they come in. A trigger could be I'm smelling something. It's so small things, or smelling mouthwash on someone. If someone's an alcoholic, there are lots of triggers. But the biggest thing is to get some help for yourself and recognizing that something has happened to the person that you love. But bigger than that, now something has happened to you.
Yeah, absolutely. Of
Yeah,
course. And we're responsible to be healthy for ourselves. I mean,
absolutely.
that's the thing. Yeah, exactly. I'm responsible for Devon, and
Yeah,
I'm responsible to take care of my health and to
yeah,
make sure that I'm reflecting a healthy person. If I'm unhealthy because I'm taking on the role of someone within my home environment, which is an ozone, then the entire system becomes unhealthy. And we
absolutely.
continue with an entire system of generation, including the children who's unhealthy. Then we want to hold them accountable when we get that call from the school. But the child is simply reflecting us. You're going to say, Dad does it.
Yeah.
Well, it's because of when mom yell, that's why I yell. All of a
Hmm.
sudden we want our children to be saints, but we to be sinners.
Oh,
Like it just doesn't work like that.
it doesn't work like that.
Yeah, it
So I'm
doesn't
hoping.
work like
Yep.
that.
So I'm hoping everyone's hearing what Devin is saying. Devin is an amazing clinician. Now, I want you to give out your information, but I want everyone to get a piece of paper, a pen, because this is an amazing clinician, and you can see how he's speaking. He's so passionate about the work he's doing, right? That he really is invested in not just in changing lives, but improving the world, right? So that we all can be living in a better society and that we can all be healed from whatever ails you. So, Mr. Devin, how can they get in contact with you?
Yeah. Well, thank you so much. You could go to my website. First of all, Devon Blackwood, that's DEVON, devonblackwood.com, right? You can fill out the form and get in touch with me there. So it's Devon, DEVON, because people want to, say, I think it's DEVIN, but it's DEVON, devonblackwood.com. You can also send me an email to Blackwood D for Devon, Blackwood D03 at gmail.com. That's Blackwood D03 at gmail.com. And I could also give up my number too. I don't mind. Give up my number here
Well, it's up
or
to
get
you.
it on the website.
It's up
Yeah,
to
that's right.
you.
Yeah, that's right. You can call me. Please leave me a message or send me a text if I don't get to the phone right away. It's 443 570 5402. That's 443 570 5402. And you can get in touch with me. I'll be delighted to, help or, suggestions and whatever I can. If you have someone, I have a private practice also. Candice is familiar with that,
Mhm.
BW Associates. And so, I'll be happy to speak with you and help in whatever way I can. I'm so elated and appreciative and honored,
Yes.
Candice.
I'm,
But we're actually talking about this issue of addiction
oh,
because it's Suicide Month, right?
yes, it is.
September
It is.
is
And
and substance use disorders is mental health.
yes, and that population is at higher risk for suicides. And I think that's the reason why this is a really timely conversation. And I think that fear of suicide is what keeps people in those loops with people who are addicted of trying to fix them, rescue them, prevent death from them. And part of the first step in recovery for everyone is realizing you're powerless over some things, right? And you're powerless over stopping someone from destroying themselves. You may slow them down, but you can't stop them. One of the things I want to say is Devin is one of my clinicians featured on the Color of Trauma and Healing.com. So not the Color of Trauma and Healing.com. He's one of the featured clinicians. Visit our site. For those of you who are living with someone or loving someone who is addicted, please consider visiting resources like Al Anon, Naranon, which are support groups for family members. If you're interested in getting our free trauma support coping mechanisms card, which has 31 coping mechanisms, go to Color of Trauma and Healing, and I will mail them out to myself personally. Have an amazing evening. Thank you, Devin. You've been awesome as usual.
Thank you
Amazing.
so much. And I always say that Dr. Candice. She is
You're
absolutely
great.
wonderful, folks. I call her Dr. Candice.
You're
Thank you
so
so
great.
much for having me and to your audience. This is such a life transformative topic. We
Yeah.
certainly hope that it will really make a positive impact on people's life. You're not alone. And if you're out there in the audience, you're listening, you're struggling, put
Absolutely.
the shame aside as best you can and reach out. No one's going to laugh at you.
Yeah.
No one's going to stigmatize you. There's tons of people in American society who are suffering in the quietness of their lives, hiding in the closet, hiding in the dark with the blankets under their head because of shame. And they cry inside and they just want someone to understand and appreciate just for a minute what they're going through. We're on your side and we want to help you. That's why we hosted this topic tonight.
Absolutely. You're not alone. Good night, everyone. Thank you, Devin.
Thank you very much. Thank you.